Hey everyone, first off, go Bucks. Got game 4 today of the NBA playoffs for them. All right, let's jump into what we have going on here. We're not talking about Nintendo Directs, at least not in this video. There is some news around Nintendo Directs pointing to this Friday, all this jazz stuff that I talked a little bit on live stream over the weekend. But we're actually talking about the Switch Pro. That's right, a new model Nintendo Switch is back in the news with brand new sources that we might be getting it in really early 2021. All right, before we get into that, though, I want to remind you of our giveaway, because we are giving away a copy of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered Edition for either PlayStation 4 or Nintendo Switch. To enter, all you have to do is comment down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon. Do that, it gets you one entry. You do that on every video this month. It gets you an additional entry. Also, we are on our road to 50,000 subscribers. If we hit 50K before November 1st of 2020, we will be giving away an Xbox Series X, a PlayStation 5, or a Nintendo Switch to one lucky winner during that month. All right, let's get into the news. And you know what? We're just going to jump right into this craziness and see what this news really is about. So this comes from VGC, Video Game Chronicles, by Andy Robinson, and says a new Switch model will launch next year. A new report claims. So, Taipei-based newspaper Economic Daily News claims on Tuesday that the new Switch would enter production later this year with a planned launch for Q1 of 2021. Now, Q1 for Nintendo is not February to March. It's actually April 1st to June. So just April, May, June, somewhere in there. So it would be kind of like a Q2, unless they're not going off Nintendo's financial schedule and they're actually going with the normal, like first quarter of 2021 is typically January through March. I don't know. Maybe they're going to drop it on March, like the same launch date as the original Switch. Anyways, that's like some of the big news right there. Boom, bam, we're getting a new Switch model next year. But they are saying that it'll feature upgraded interactivity, whatever that means, not sure, and an improved display quality. So we're assuming maybe a glass screen, maybe 1080p. We'll see with that. The report cites various hardware manufacturers responsible for the Switch's flash storage, Joy-Con controllers, and more. So the sources for this, according to Economic Daily News, a Taipei-based newspaper, like an actual newspaper, is saying this is happening, and it's based on people that are actually making the components, which makes sense. There's components made in China, Taiwan, all this stuff. Usually, like when we hear from sources like Nikkei, out of Japan, they're also getting their sources from manufacturing. So that's not too shocking. There's obviously been a lot of reports, like Digitimes, a Taiwanese website, put out there. The new Switch hardware would enter mass production in the first quarter of this year and launch soon after. Obviously, we had the pandemic and all that kind of, if that was ever to be true, the pandemic would have messed all that up. In April, a firmware update supposedly referenced a new unannounced hardware model. That's a factual thing that did happen. According to an engineer, the console's version 10.0 firmware refers to NXABCD hardware model, which already references codenames for the launch model, Switch and Switch Lite, etc. So that was like an additional new model listed that we still haven't seen come out. In 3 months ending June 30th, Nintendo Switch hardware cleared 5.5 million units, represents a year-on-year sales increase of 160%. And analysts have suggested, actually, you don't have to go with analysts. Nintendo has basically said they're going to have a really long life for Switch. One way to keep that long life going, of course, naturally, is to bam, release a new model. So what are my thoughts on this? In general, I feel like this was always a strategy for Nintendo. I predicted this. You guys can go back on I think it was on a live stream. I put out there that we're getting a new Switch in 2021. I said if there was ever to be a Switch Pro, it's next year. And the reason is you get away from the launch of the next-gen systems. And Nintendo can maintain momentum through the end of this year, even without releasing new games, although they're going to release new games. And I think 2021 is going to be a killer year with software anyways. And there's a slight chance they could launch this system with Breath of the Wild 2. You could literally have a March 3rd, 2021 release date for Switch Pro and Breath of the Wild 2, marking the anniversary of the original Switch release back in March 3rd of 2017. So they could actually double up that and make it like this really cool anniversary celebration. And by the way, it's not replacing the current Switch. It's just a slightly improved model. And now they only talk about, the screen being better. That's been something that's been talked about for a long time. We do know Nintendo has a contract with a better screen manufacturer, although those screens have not appeared in any of the current model Switches. So that's always been rumored to maybe be part of this or part of a new Switch or a next-gen platform. And the improved interactivity, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means better Bluetooth. I don't know if it means everything's just snappier. There's obviously no specifics here on spec increases, whether it's more RAM, whether it's a faster CPU, GPU, more teraflops. There's nothing on that front because obviously they just don't have information on that. And we've heard so many various things over the years on what this Switch Pro could be, from it being way more powerful to just being slightly more powerful. I obviously lean more towards the slightly. We're talking about, I think, a new Nintendo 3DS style upgrade. However, the new 3DS upgrade was actually a fairly big upgrade. It doubled the RAM, as an example. Like, it was a fairly big upgrade. It was a fairly big upgrade over something that was already not that great in terms of technology. So it didn't feel like a giant leap to the end consumer. And I feel like we could see something similar here where it's a significant upgrade that lets you do 1080p gaming on the go or something. Because to have 1080p gaming on the go with a better screen isn't just about having a better screen. You have to have better performance, and you have to have a better working part. And what that should enable potentially is if Nintendo uses the shrunk down Tegra X1, which does exist. If they use the shrunk and die version, they could actually potentially get docked performance in handheld mode. That is exciting. Just the mere fact that you could imagine docked performance in handheld mode with the same power draw it currently has. That is something I think is realistic for a Switch Pro and would be considered a big upgrade for some people that think the frame rates or the resolution are just too low in handheld. And the exciting part is, potentially, this does mean that docked performance could be even better. They could overclock it faster and get higher performance in docked mode. So that's just a theory I'm throwing out there. But who isn't excited about a Switch Pro, a potential Switch Pro? I'm actually kind of at a loss for words. We haven't talked about Switch Pro pretty much since the pandemic kind of happened, because that kind of wiped away any shot of a new system coming this year. They couldn't keep up with normal Switch production. How the hell are they going to get a Switch Pro out in the middle of a pandemic? That just didn't make sense to me. I actually think it's going to affect PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X as well. So what I'm interested in actually is, how is Nintendo going to market this Switch Pro, or whatever they call it? Switch, new Nintendo Switch. Nintendo uses interesting naming conventions. It probably won't be Pro, even though that's what we as consumers have been calling it. So I'm really curious to see what Nintendo is going to do for marketing, because if it's releasing March of next year, they got to announce it, I don't know, sometime soon? I mean, they will not announce it before holiday. They're not going to make people be like, oh, I'm not going to buy a Switch this holiday because Switch Pro is coming. It would be something that would be announced like January. They're not going to give us a lot of advance notice of when this is coming out, because they're not going to want to affect holiday sales if it is coming out Q1. Or maybe they just don't care. Maybe Nintendo is not going to have it. I mean, I hate thinking this, but what if Nintendo isn't going to have a major game this holiday? Because they're putting all their baskets in Switch Pro next year, and they're saying, hey, look, we're going to have a major game coming out every month next year, and somewhere in there we're launching this Switch Pro device. Buy a Switch this holiday, don't buy a Switch this holiday, up to you. We're releasing a better one next year, but it's not going to be a replacement. So you do with that information what you want. Nintendo could do something like that. Seems unlikely. More likely than not, we are not going to get confirmation or hear about this until January of 2021 at the earliest. But who knows? Maybe Nintendo decides to drop it out there at the next Nintendo Direct, which supposedly is coming this week. I don't know. I'm not saying to expect an announcement. That would be crazy. Unless they're launching it this holiday, that would be really crazy. But you guys let me know what you think about this, actually, because I'm kind of at a loss for words. I didn't expect any news on this until next year. I didn't expect, but for it to come from the manufacturing people makes me feel like this has to be legit, because if they're going to release it next year, early next year, they have to be making it right now. And they just got the Nintendo Switch up to regular production levels. So maybe because they have Switch back up to regular production levels, they're just ramping up the Switch Pro stuff as well. Why not? Maybe this just a delayed launch was going to be this year. Now it's going to be early next year. I think it makes sense. The release timing would make sense to let the hype of the new gen systems happen, while Nintendo still maintains high sales, release big-name games, launch it with a big-name game that isn't exclusive to it, but obviously performs better on it. Yeah, I think that's a good strategy for Nintendo. And I want to know, do you guys even want a Switch Pro? I think that's something that we have to earnestly talk about is the desire for a Switch Pro. Or are you just fine with your OG Switch and you're cool? Like even the slightly upgraded one out there that most people don't even notice the improvements on. Do you even care? Let me know down in the comments below. I am Nathaniel Robojans from Nintendo Prime. Glad to bring you this news on Switch freaking Pro. Maybe we'll get into direct stuff later today. Maybe we won't. I don't know. But this is not something I expected to cover on August 24th, 2020. So, cheers.